With that, I'd like to welcome Kathy Lorette, our moderator for the day, to introduce Leadershift, Pathways to Gender Equity.
Great, thanks, Alex. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the online launch of Leadershift, Pathways to Gender Equity. My name is Kathy Lorette. I'm the Senior Vice President of Business Transformation at Electra Utilities, and I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to introduce today's proceedings on a topic that affects every one of us in the workplace, regardless of our gender. It's great to see the large audience today, as it really signifies the importance of this issue and how passionate so many of us are for creating change in this area. So the agenda for today starts with a presentation on the research by Michelle Brannigan, who's the CEO of EHRC, and Marutu Moga-Frieza, who is the Program Manager of Diversity and Inclusion and the report's research lead. We'll then move to a panel discussion with industry members Lynn Parent-Garvey, Jeanette Southwood, and Elaina Eifler. And finally, we'll open it up to questions and answer period. So if you'd like to submit a question, please enter it at any time into the chat box, and a member of our team will submit it to the panel. As we know, gender representation at work is an ongoing conversation. The electricity sector has long been very male-dominated and has been slow to embrace change. Many of us have seen programs and initiatives aimed at supporting women's advancement over our careers, but despite these efforts, progress has been far too slow. Women's participation in the sector remains about 26%, and women's representation at leadership levels is similarly low. So what's going on here? Well, Leadershift provides the missing piece of the puzzle. As the first survey of its kind, specifically looking at the status of women's representation in Canada's electricity sector, Leadershift offers a valuable snapshot of where we are right now. The report highlights existing initiatives, profiles champions of equality, and offers recommendations on how we can make our existing empowerment and support programs stronger to create meaningful, lasting change. So with that, let's move right into it. And I'm going to turn it over to Michelle and Marutu for the discussion of Leadershift, Pathways to Gender Equity.
Thank you, Kathy. And for those who don't know us, Electricity Human Resources Canada, or EHRC, is the organization that provides trusted labor market intelligence and evidence-based solutions for human resource challenges in the electricity sector. We speak to best HR practices and innovative HR programs developed from evidence-based research. And as a national organization, we provide commentary on HR issues that impact the electricity sector every day. We really pride ourselves on acting as an essential HR partner for all of industry, supporting the electricity industry's most critical asset, which is, of course, our people. Now, over the years, we have collected data on the number of women in the electricity sector at a broad level. But of course, we saw that there was that missing piece, and that was the lack of information in regards to women's representation at the most senior levels, on boards and in corporate leadership roles. So if you're on this call, you'll know that there is now broad consensus that companies really benefit in having a diverse workforce. Enhanced innovation and competitiveness, higher employee engagement, and lower strategic risk. These are just some of the benefits that have been documented. And in the context of an electricity industry that is facing dramatic shifts, be that technological or demographical, the advancement of women into leadership positions is critical. But to do that successfully, to actually move that dial, we need to understand the structural and cultural barriers that are impeding women today. As you'll hear, the research confirms what is well known by most industry observers, and that is that the leadership ranks do not reflect the number of talented women in the sector. So the leadership report will provide our stakeholders with more information on how to accelerate change, and also to fully understand why these changes are necessary. And as you'll hear, not everyone is on the same page. However, change is possible, and I think the report really is going to provide insights on how we move forward. Now, in the interest of time, I'm going to keep this section very brief. More detail can be found, of course, in the report. So it's now live on our website, electricityhr.ca. So following this event, you can go and get access to the full report. Throughout the research, we did engage with over 61 organizations of all sizes, geography, and business line. And following an extensive literature review, we conducted a survey which gathered not only statistical data, but explored the personal experiences and perspectives of both men and women working in the sector. We then moved on and developed champion case studies with 7 men, senior leaders, who are all recognized industry change agents. Now, each of these men described the personal experiences that shaped their understanding of gender issues and saw them actually walk the talk when it came to making a difference in their own organizations. The study was also guided by a national steering committee who provided great insight and support throughout the project. Thank you so much. I know most of you are on the call. And with that, I am going to pass it over to Murtu to take us through the start of some of the findings. Murtu, over to you.
Hello, sorry. Thanks, Michelle. Here's the exciting stuff. So I'm going to speak to some of the key numbers that emerged as we look at both boards of directors and executive teams in the sector. So among the 61 industry organizations that we researched, we found that 88% of boards have at least one woman sitting at the table, which means 12% of the boards still have no women. And 77% of the boards have 2 or more women, which means that almost 1/4, which is 23% of the boards, have no women or only one woman member. The previous research has concluded that one woman alone on a board is insufficient and that the business benefits of diversity are unlikely to be gained. Based on these numbers alone, the board in our sector are missing out on the advantages that a more balanced perspective can bring. Also note that being an only one board member has its own downside, for instance. As the only member on a board, women can face challenges in getting their voices heard and may sometimes be seen as token or feel themselves that they are seen as token or not because of their skills or experiences. But we have some positive news when we take into account the size of the boards, in that having 2 women on a 4-person board is not the same as having 2 women on 10-person board. So we found that 63% of the boards have more than from 25 to 49% of their seats held by women, and a very few, or 6%, have had half or more of their seats held by women. So overall, 30% of board seats are held by women. Within individual boards, 58% of the boards have met or exceeded the 30% critical mass benchmark. So when we move from board to executive teams, we found that the sector's track record in executive ranking is not quite as positive at the board level. We found that 1/4 of the companies we researched have no women publicly listed on their executive teams, and almost half, which is about 46%, have no women listed in the C-suite positions. Overall, we have 26% of the senior executive named on company information sources are women. If you look at your screen and see the charts on the left, you will see the representation in executive teams. We have 34% of the companies have 1/4 to 1/2 women. And in 26% of the organization, the companies, there are less than 1/4 women represented. And 25% of them have no women. And then we look at the 15% of the companies that are comprised of half or more women in their executive teams. While this 15% might be encouraging, these organizations are not typical of the industry overall, and we saw a small number of organizations organizations that responded to the study, which kind of skewed the results. And if we look at the right side to see most roles held by women, we note that the women are overrepresented in corporate functions such as HR, IT, legal. And we all know that roles in corporate functions rarely lead to CEO positions. And this is a trend that we saw through the study. What this means is that these women are likely missing the highly valued operations and technical experience that would advance them into the CEO and other key decision-making roles.
Hello?
It also contributes to the gender pay gap, with women continuing to earn less than men. I'm wondering if anybody has a challenge hearing me?
I can hear you okay, Maria, too.
Okay, so now let's go further into and look at the diversity of the board. How is the representation? So when we look at the diversity of the boards themselves and break it by age, ethnicity, education level, the field of study, and certification, over 1/3 are aged 55 and above and maybe looking to retire. And then we have only 44% that are members of visible minority groups, and then we only have 3% representing the indigenous population. So even within our female representation, there is room for improvement. You can also look at the field of study, reflect on what I just mentioned earlier. Almost all have university degree and or a professional designation. The most common fields of study are commerce, STEM fields, and law. And I think there's a trend here, which means that many women are not working in the area which they studied and trained, or they're actually hitting the glass ceiling somewhere within their careers. So it wasn't enough for us to look at the numbers, and numbers can be a little bit boring, but so we found it critical also to just go through and understand and examine what's happening in the workplace. And so we wanted to explore the perspective of all the employees, men and women, and Michelle would present that for you in a few minutes.
Thanks, Maria. Thanks, Maria, too. So while the research, of course, looked at the numbers, who's sitting around the board table and in the C-suite, we also looked at organizational culture and examined the viewpoints of men and women working in the sector. Men, of course, still make up over 74% of the industry, and as such, they have still have great influence on hiring decisions at all levels. Not to mention developing a culture that is or is not equitable for all employees. So we discovered that women and men don't see the problem the same way. And I wasn't surprised at the fact that men and women still view gender equity progress differently, but I was surprised, however, at how far apart the views actually were. Almost 1 in every 5 men, so 18% that we surveyed, believed that it is actually easier for women to succeed in their workplace than it is for men. In contrast, 3 of every 4 women, so 75%, believe that women have a more difficult journey. So we'll just take a quick look at the 4 areas where we saw the biggest difference in perspectives. So compared to the 82% of men who believe that they can demonstrate their full abilities and potential in the workplace, only 66% of women feel the same way. Now, women believe that their advancement has been held back because of others' assessment of their technical skills or of their behaviors and their styles, such as teamwork, the way they communicate, even ambition. And while 6% of men think that their employer's opinion on their style of behavior has held them back, over 1/3 of the women we surveyed actually felt that way. And then we look at colleagues' opinions. So while none of the men thought that their colleagues' opinion of them was a barrier to success, 27% of women felt that it was indeed a barrier to their advancement. And then finally, 25% of the women also found it a challenge to get the educational and skills development they needed to succeed in their career of choice. None of the men actually reported that was an issue. So really, the industry is really still falling short on creating a shared understanding of our sector's gender reality, with men being much more likely to think that gender or ethnic backgrounds don't make a difference in relation to career success. And these views matter because the respondents who are positive about career supports are more satisfied with their jobs, more likely to recommend working in the sector, and less likely to be planning to leave. So what were the perspectives around those who are actually in charge, those in leadership positions at the executive level? Well, the women in our survey are not at all confident that senior leaders are aware of the barriers or the extent of the barriers within the organization. That's one piece. The research also reported that women still have some doubts about the commitment of our industry's leaders, including within their own organization. And 1 in every 7 women in our survey feel that leaders within the electricity sector are not at all interested in increasing the numbers of women in leadership, and that a lack of executive commitment limits women's progress in their own company. However, almost half of the men feel that the leaders are very committed. So it appears that men and women are hearing very different messages there. And in fact, senior management respondents were much more likely to believe that equity is firmly established within their organization. So understanding why women's workplace experiences often differ so much from their male counterparts, it's critical, because these differences in perspective make it even more challenging to reach agreement on actions for change. Now, the research also found that male managers are not the only ones who might be hesitant to take action on gender issues. About 1/3 of respondents also believe that women avoid supporting gender equity initiatives. In some cases, they fear potential backlash or reputational risk. So they don't want to be seen as making waves or being labeled if they push too hard. And that, while it's understandable, is a little bit disheartening. It suggests that they don't believe that the organization is as truly committed to gender inclusion as a positive focus for the business. The men we spoke to, some of them didn't see that there were gender barriers. They don't think that they themselves have the scope to make change, or they're deterred by a concern that merit will be put at risk, that women will get promoted over other candidates just because they are a woman. And then among our survey respondents, this relates to culture, is 1 of every 5 women, so 20%, which was high, I thought, reported that they had personally experienced harassment, violence, or bullying in their workplace, at least monthly, in the last 5 years. So the third focus of our research was looking at why and how individuals can make a difference. Just over 51% of our survey respondents report that all talk, no action is a barrier to making progress towards greater gender balance in their organization. But our 7 champion first-person interviews and their organizational success have shown that it can be done. These men have taken concrete action and demonstrate the impact of active, day-by-day, persistent involvement of leaders as advocates. Each of them describes the experiences that help them become personally more aware of the challenges that women face in the workplace. And then they translated that awareness into behaviors that actually make a difference, such things as addressing unconscious bias, building the trust required for flexible work arrangements, navigating style differences between women and men, using equity to advance women's careers, and sponsoring women for growth opportunities. So they have really inspired me. And I know the 2 quotes are above are ones that I will be using again and again, because at the end of the day, it's time to start doing. Now, as always with any study, it's really important how we respond and what we do next. So I'm going to hand back over to Maritu for a brief overview of our recommendations.
Okay, so based on what we uncovered through the study and our understanding of the gaps, we recommend the value of building awareness, which is key, and support by communicating on a personal level with candor and openness to difficult discussions. So we have to motivate leadership and all employees by sharing our success stories, and at a personal and organization level. There's no way around it. And spread the discussion across the organization, where and every day if needed. We also have to change the narrative of women and address the perception, implement good practices, and then measure and report on the progress achieved and the benefits gained. We have to realize that change for women implies change for men. So with change comes the challenge of confronting, we know that, but long-standing behavior patterns of women and men, we also need to change to more equitable, inclusive environment for all. It is also essential to ensure that your organization, our organization culture supports work-life effectiveness. And we have to be intentional about it. Yes. And we have to make it thoroughly normal, for example, for a new dad to take a year's parental leave and women leading the refurbishment of our nuclear plant. So it takes commitment at the individual and organization level if we want to be part of this transition into a more equitable industry. So speaking of commitment, I would like to bring something up to you. Just a reminder for anyone who is not aware, to take a look at our leadership accord on gender diversity, which encourages our leaders to commit fully in supporting women in their organization. And this leadership accord provides a framework which enables organizations to assess their current situation and improve. We almost have 100 organizations that are leading the way, and they are championing it. And if you want more information on how you can participate, please reach out to us through HRC or myself. There's also more information on our website. That is the end of our conversation about the findings, and I will hand it back to Kathy, who will be leading our panel discussion.
Okay, thank you, Marie. That was excellent. So I can't wait for all of you to go in and read the report on the ERC website. So let's start off with some questions from our panel, and then turn it over.
I can't hear you very well.
I can't hear you. Can you hear me?
No.
There seems to be some distortion coming through. It's possible it's feedback from other microphones being on.
Okay. Maybe everybody can turn their mic on, mic off.
Okay.
Alex,
Alex, can you do it so that everyone's mic off is off just for a moment, and just Kathy, whoever's speaking, gets their mic on?
Okay, let's try the same thing. Okay. So let's start off with a question for Lynn from Ottawa. And Lynn is also the chair of the advisory committee for this report. So Lynn, which of the report findings did you find most compelling or surprising? And was it the numbers or the perspectives, and why?
Sorry, Kathy, I think your audio is still coming through a little bit broken.
Okay, do you read the question, Alex?
I'll encourage Maruta or Michelle to share the questions. If you could just temporarily mute, I'll bring up all the speakers right now.
Which of the report findings did you find the most compelling or surprising? The numbers or their perspectives, and why?
Perfect. Thank you, Michelle. But before I get to that, Michelle, I want to reiterate the importance of this work for our sector and for our organizations on gender equality, because I strongly believe that we truly do need to make more space for women to ensure that we better reflect the communities that we serve, that we can successfully navigate the change and disruption in our industry with balance and increased collaboration and innovation, and of course to help us continually improve our business. There are two of the findings I want to talk about, and you and Marutu have talked a bit about them already. But the first is the representation of women on boards and in the C-suite. So for me, transformational change really starts at the top, and more representation of women on boards and in our C-suite is key. So as the report says, there's a general consensus that a gender inclusive executive team and board of directors can produce better results. But as an industry, we still have a lot of work to do in this area. So having 30% of board seats in our sector held by women, I thought was encouraging. But then that some organizations don't have any women on their board or only have one woman on their board, I found that discouraging. At the same time, when you get to the C-suite level, with almost half of the companies that were researched having no women, well, then that was disappointing as well. But then that means there's at least 50% who do have women in their C-suite, and that's encouraging. I strongly believe, and I've always said this, that seeing is believing, and that young women who start their careers in our sector or in our organizations must be able to see what's possible, what's attainable, what's a viable career path for them, because if they don't see that, they'll leave. So again, you know, women on boards, women in C-suites is important. It's important for young women to see what's possible. The other area I want to talk about is culture and speaking up. So the comments around culture really stood out for me in the report, and I think it's so important that we're talking about those divided perspectives between the genders. So as Michelle was saying, you know, women speaking about the barriers they face and believing they're at a disadvantage, and then on the other hand, you know, we have men believing that the playing field is equal and that in fact it might even be easier for women to succeed. So I think it's really important that we speak more openly about these different perspectives, not just in the report. I do think we can use the report as an impetus to doing that, but we need to talk about this in our organizations. And the other comment I was particularly interested in is from women and non-management employees around leadership teams not being conscious of barriers faced by women. So I had to think about that because I think we are conscious. I think especially women leaders, men as well. But I think that we don't speak openly about it as much. But I can assure folks that in private deliberations, it's spoken about, as well as what are possible solutions or the different approaches we can take. So clearly what that said to me is, as leaders, we need to do a better job of translating the understanding that we do have into visible support so that we can, more openly remove barriers and create successful environments for women, and especially women in our traditionally male-dominated roles. And then lastly, the comment I want to end with is I think we can learn so much from the report. There's best practices outlined throughout the report, and really at the end of the day, there's not one solution, right? We're going to have to take a number of different approaches so that we can move forward. And I'm personally a big believer in taking what's worked in other organizations and trying it out in our organization. So I think I would end by just encouraging everyone to do the same, to learn from the report, to take out the best practices or the examples, and to apply those in your organizations and see if it works. So on that, thank you for the opportunity. I'll pass it back to Michelle or Kathy.
Michelle, you want me to give it another shot?
Yeah, you sound much better. Yeah, that's no reverb right now.
Okay, so let's move on for a question for Jeanette Southwood, who's an executive with Engineers Canada. So what has helped you to become an influential executive, and what advice would you have for others who want to set off in a similar direction?
So thank you, Kathy, and thank you very much to the EHRC for the invitation to speak today. I'm honored to be here with my fellow panelists and with Kathy, Michelle, and Marere too. Congratulations also to the EHRC on the launch of this report today. When I was very young, my parents immigrated from Cape Town, South Africa with almost nothing during the time of apartheid so that my sisters and I could have a safer life. After coming to Canada, I was fortunate to have attended university and become an engineer, but it was not until my current role as a Vice President in Engineers Canada that I came to understand how fortunate I was. At Engineers Canada, my team's portfolios include diversity, equity, and inclusion, globalization and sustainable development, outreach, member services, communications and government relations, public affairs, and public policy. Engineers Canada is the national organization of Canada's 12 engineering regulators that license Canada's more than 300,000 members of the engineering profession, and we are proud signatories to EHRC's Diversity Accord. One of our key focus areas at Engineers Canada is 30 by 30. Our goal to have 30% of newly licensed engineers be women by 2030. Our work tackles barriers at all parts of the continuum: kindergarten to grade 12, post-secondary, early career, and industry. You've seen the research that describes some of the success factors for women. For example, encouragement from family, the importance of peer support, role models, men as allies, and the forging of bonds with social and professional and technical networks. For myself at that time, a young Black woman embarking on a STEM education and career who was a first-generation Canadian, first-generation university student, and first-generation engineer, if it was not for these success factors, I would not be in front of you today. So what advice do I have for others? Well, develop a strong network of friends and colleagues, people who will be there for you during good times and in times of failure, because everyone experiences failure. And be there for those friends and colleagues during their good times and bad times. Listen to advice and feedback, and keep an open heart and an open mind to opportunities, both work opportunities and volunteer opportunities. Connect to and participate in professional and technical networks. I'm a longtime volunteer with several organizations. Find your allies. And finally, I believe that we all know that the challenges do not get any easier as a career progresses and as positions progress from junior to senior. Unfortunately, at all stages of a career, we can currently expect to see the recurrence of the same negative attitudes and behaviors. The difference for those of you early in your career will be that as your career progresses, you will have the increasing resilience that you will build through your friends, your family, your colleagues, and your allies. And the difference for all of us will be the difference that is made through the work at EHRC, the work at Engineers Canada, and the work of other organizations like ours, that we are fighting those negative attitudes and behaviors, trying to reduce their occurrence, challenging the status quo so that they won't be as prevalent for future generations. As I mentioned, always in my career, there have been challenges about some aspects of organizational culture and the assumptions about what a woman or a member of a visible minority can or cannot do, what is and is not an appropriate role, and also the assumptions and stereotypes about what a leader looks like. Sometimes I had to ignore it, pretend that it didn't exist, try to understand it better, and find my allies, champions, and sponsors. Sometimes I had to oppose it directly. I needed sponsors, senior people who believed that I could take on leadership positions. I fostered strong relationships with people who believed in me. So what else did I do to blaze and build these pathways to gender equity? I've been a mentor and sponsor of women. I've amplified voices. I've shone a spotlight and provided support to advance careers. My teams have been diverse and inclusive. We can all do these things, and we can give back by participating in, supporting, and leading the change that needs to be made in our culture. The Leadershift report identifies behaviors that can be made to change workplace culture and make a difference for women. For example, understanding and addressing unconscious bias, creating a more welcoming workplace for women, advocating for others and doing your part to build the structures and the culture that will advance the careers of others, and cascading this message throughout your organization and beyond. Thank you so much for the opportunity to participate today. Congratulations once again to the HRC, and back to you, Kathy.
Great, thank you, Jeanette. So we'll turn it over to Elaina, who is a senior manager at ATCO and also an EHRC board member. So Elaina, in your perspective, what is the biggest challenge organizations and leaders are having at the moment to improve on women's representation at the leadership level?
Great. Thanks, Kathy. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. So yes, thank you for the opportunity to present today. I have to say that reading this report, I do find it is one of the best reports I've read around gender equity to date. There's so much real information in there around the numbers, the actions, voices of real people in our industry. So congratulations on the report, it's excellent. So for me, this is a big question. So I really had to sit back and think about it. And I couldn't just boil it down to one. I had to have two of the biggest challenges in organizations. For me, number one is the numbers themselves. Number two is the mindsets within our organizations. So first, talking about the numbers, we've heard it already, and 26% of the people working in the electricity industry are women. And we even see those percentages drop further when we're talking about the STEM occupations, which we know are the highly desired skill sets to get to some of those more senior positions in companies. So really the lack of the numbers overall and the even smaller population within these STEM occupations leaves a real problem in terms of a pool coming up the ranks to actually get into those positions. So a few suggestions to get started for folks on the phone. I think we're all really accountable to know our numbers and know why they are like they are. So if you have been putting a ton of effort into diversity initiatives at your company, and you find yourself in a place where you are have numbers of women over the benchmarks, congratulations. But I would say to you, do not stop or slow down. Rather, find how you've gained this momentum and pour gasoline all over it. Light that fire. The last thing you want to do is slow down and go back to trying to put two sticks together to create it again. For most of us, we will find in our organizations that we are at the benchmarks or below when it comes to women in leadership. So like my colleagues have said, take full advantage of the Leadershift report because there's tons of specific actions and ideas for things you can try within your organization. This has been mentioned as well, but ask lots of questions to everyone at all levels in all functions to really find out what it would take to move the needle, and also what have you been trying that actually is not working and you need to fess up and move on. Think about your recruitment and promotion practices. Are they helping or hindering the numbers you currently have? Tons of research tells us that the hardest move for a woman to make is from individual contributor to manager. And when I speak to my friends about us being in leadership, we always get to the place where we feel like we need to be more, do more, be more seen within our organizations to get these promotions. So immediately where my head goes to is, do you have a culture and an acceptance for people to be courageous within your organization? Step out, be bold, and really get to a place of innovation. But the other critical success factor there is having a high level of accountability within your organization. You can be courageous and put your ideas forward, but if you're not holding people accountable to deliver those big results, you won't have the impact, and therefore the promotion might not come. So encouraging people to be courageous, but also having a high level of accountability is critical within organizations. The other piece there I would say is get involved outside your company. So right now, 56% of Canadian institutions that have STEM programs have specific initiatives to draw women in, which is awesome. So how can we help them and how can we hire those women into our companies? Second is really around mindsets, and this is the big one. A mindset can be defined as a person's way or attitude about thinking about something. For example, if I believe that the percentage of women in the electricity industry is pretty good, considering it's an industry traditionally filled with jobs by men, I'm not likely to behave in a way that's going to put real effort into increasing these numbers. So for me, the few mindsets in the report have been mentioned but are key. Almost 1 in 5 men in the survey believe that it's actually easier for women to succeed in the workplace. And in contrast, 3 of every 4 women believe that it's harder to succeed in the workplace. The other one that stuck out for me is many men feel that gender diversity measures are sometimes unfair and detrimental to their own career opportunities. And leaders, male and female, assume that the D&I problem is nearly solved, which is drastically misaligned with non-management staff who report that a person's sex or ethnic background makes a big difference. So the men on the call right now probably feel like I'm calling you out in a way, and I am, but not in the way you might think. I think unleashing and talking about these mindsets is critical, and it's some of the first times I've been hearing the real ones come out. The ones I know because I am married to a white engineer at home. I know how they think, and they're finally coming out, these mindsets that are important. So really for mindsets, what do? Dig into the mindsets that exist in your organization, and they are literally driving the behaviors that are helping or hindering your efforts. Changing mindsets is hard, and the data around the business case for why you would want to is very clear and available. When company succeeds, everybody succeeds. So really, when you're going out and learning about mindsets, be prepared to learn more and be thankful that you did. By you asking for people's honest opinions about diversity is role modeling the courageous behaviors that we know we need more of in organizations. More courage equals more information and more opportunities for everyone to step up and deliver high impact results, which is critical to be seen and critical to have more people in leadership in our organization. Thank you very much for the opportunity today, and I'll hand it back to Michelle or Kathy.
Okay, thanks, Elaina. So we've got some questions from the audience that we'd like to go through. We may not be able to get to them all, but let's start. And we'll probably can issue answers to some of the questions we can't get to later. So let's do the first one, and I'm going to send this one over to you, Jeanette. So how have organizations engaged men in supporting equity initiatives when they don't believe this to be an issue?
Thanks for that question. At Engineers Canada, one of the areas that we have put a strong focus on with respect to 30 by 30 is the employer and the industry part of the continuum. And I'm going to step back for a moment and provide just a little bit of context. When we look at our goal, and I'm going to use 30 by 30. Oh, sorry, can you hear me? Can you hear me clearly? Yeah. Okay,
yes,
perfect.
I can hear you.
Great. I'm going to use, and I'm going to go quickly because I know that there are lots of questions and we're close to the end here. We know that reaching 30 by 30, reaching 30% of newly licensed engineers being women by 2030 is not something that can be tackled by only approaching women that are on the road to licensure. We know that the context for women in the workplace and workplace culture needs to improve. We know that we need to have women in the continuum for our universities. We know that women who are in high school need to feel more comfortable about the prospect of engineering as a career or a STEM career in general. With respect to men in the workplace, what we are tackling with our employer initiative is the workplace culture piece. We found that, and I think this very much echoes what is in the leadership report, that if the culture, if the attitudes, if the actions aren't set from the top in that case, then those men who are not comfortable with the way that the organization is going forward, they're not going to change. They are not going to see that there is a need for themselves to change. So long story short, it's the need for the message and the action to change and to improve and to be there from the top. Hope that helps. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jeanette. Okay, I'm going to send the next question over to Lynn. So Lynn, what do leaders need to recognize to achieve and sustain a culture change in their organization? Or what makes culture change possible?
Wow, that's a big question. So I think you first need to start with what is your culture, right? You need to understand what your cultural strengths are and what your cultural weaknesses are. And then you need to use your strengths to build upon the the cultural attributes that that you need to strengthen, or that you need more of. And so once you've identified the cultural attributes that you need more of, then you need to put together action plans that you know, look at every aspect of how you do business, that look at your entire employee life cycle and how you can support and draw attention to you know, to the cultural attributes that that you want more of. So in short, that's what I would say. You've got to understand what your culture is. You have to understand and turn your mind to what do you want your culture to be, and ideally you want a culture that's able to help you deliver on your strategic plan or your strategic direction. And then you need to do the heavy lift of you know, of trying to change the culture and draw attention to those attributes. And I think the last thing I want to say is it's a long road to change a culture. It takes time. Some would say it takes a generational change, but I think I wouldn't. I would say just keep at it, right? And over time, the culture will change to the culture that you want.
That's good. Yes, it certainly is a journey, not a sprint.
Mm-hmm.
So, Michelle, I'm just looking at time. We probably don't have time for any more questions.
I think we'll capture them and we'll send them out to, we'll do a response, Kathy, and respond to folks along with the communication that we send to them following this launch.
Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to you for closing remarks. I want to thank you, the panel, very much for answering those questions.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. And again, I will echo Kathy's remark. Thank you so much, Lynn, Jeanette, and Elaina. You've offered great insight today. And of course, to our moderator and chair of the EHRC board, Kathy Lorette, who I think most people in the industry know Kathy. While we really do miss holding these discussions in person, I hope we're all coming away today with inspiration from what we've heard. And I really do believe that the insights from this research drive home the need to accelerate progress. To begin, it appears that we're still falling short on creating a shared understanding of our sector's gender reality. Many of the organizations have instances of long-standing gaps in practices and in women's representation, and they need to be addressed. But there are good stories. We have good momentum. We have pockets of great practices, and we've got some really inspiring success stories to build upon. You know, the current dramatic shifts in our industry right now, it presents an opportunity for change. We must and we can move resolutely now to more fully leverage the leadership talent of women. We want to continue the momentum, so our doors are always open, even if only virtually right now. So reach out and contact us if you want to be part of that journey with us. As Lynn and Kathy said, you know, it's going to be a marathon, but we can do it. And we have the tools and resources to get you started or to support your organization at any stage of that journey, including with our leadership accord. And so with that, we will close, and thank you all so much for your participation today, and please enjoy reading the report.